Takakota sent us. The words weren't a request, more like a brand. $12 for a horse, that was the deal, wasn't it? Turns out it bought more than just a strong back. I should have walked, should have kept riding. Now look at the mess, her eyes. They ain't begging, they're waiting. See, they think I'm some kind of hero. Not hardly. Truth is, I needed that horse. Bad. This ain't about saving damsels. It's about survival, theirs and mine. He thinks he's selling them. He's dead wrong. Little does he know, her quiet will break him. Takakota sent us. The words weren't a request, more like a brand. $12 for a horse. That was the deal, wasn't it? Turns out it bought more than just a strong back. I should have walked, should have kept riding. Now look at the mess. Her eyes, they ain't begging, they're waiting. See, they think I'm some kind of hero. Not hardly. Truth is, I needed that horse. Bad. This ain't about saving damsels. It's about survival, theirs and mine. He thinks he's selling them. He's dead wrong. Little does he know, her quiet will break him. Dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple when they appeared. Fletcher Knox hadn't heard them approach. He'd been dead to the world, sprawled in his bedroll, the cheap wool scratchy against his skin. 3 days of relentless riding after scraping together the $12 and finding himself a horse had worn him down to the bone. He blinked against the growing light, his hand instinctively drifting toward the rifle nestled beside him. 2 figures stood silhouetted against the trees, watching. Women. They were as still as ancient stones, their faces obscured by shadow, but he felt their eyes heavy with something that settled on him like a shroud, a blend of accusation and raw desperation. The chestnut mare, the mare, as the old Takakota man had called her, cropped grass nearby, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. The women moved like shadows themselves, each footfall muted, each gesture economical. One clutched a small, worn bundle. The other's hands were empty, but her posture radiated a quiet strength that belied her youth. Fletcher rose slowly, every muscle protesting. His gaze swept over them, searching for any sign of threat. The older woman, her face etched with hard lines, mirrored his scrutiny, her dark eyes unflinching. She tilted her head, a subtle movement that spoke volumes, as if she were weighing the odds of him using the weapon. 3 days. 3 days ago, he'd been 70 miles south, staring down the barrel of a winter he couldn't afford. The northern pass was a death sentence without a horse, and the trading post had been his last desperate gamble. When Takakota offered him the mare, the strongest horse in the territory, for a mere $12, Fletcher thought fortune had finally smiled upon him. He should have known better. Luck, especially that cheap, always demanded a steeper price than advertised. "Where did you come from?" His voice, rasped rough from sleep and dust, surprised even him. The older woman glanced at her companion before turning back to him. Her English was precise, yet tinged with an accent that spoke of a life lived far from towns and civilization. "Takakota sent us." The words landed like a punch to the gut, cold and unexpected. A primal unease slithered down Fletcher's spine. "What arrangement? I bought a horse. That was the agreement." "Yes, horse." She gestured towards the grazing mare. "And us?" The implications hit him with brutal force. He mentally replayed the transaction, searching for the hidden clause. The old man's unnatural eagerness to sell, the furtive glances toward the hills, the strange wording of the deal. "Everything needed for the journey," he'd said. "Damn. I didn't agree to this," Fletcher growled, his voice sharpening. "I don't know what your father thinks, but I am not." "He is not selling us," the woman interrupted, her tone flat and resolute. "You do not understand." "Then explain it to me." She studied him, her gaze piercing. Something flickered in her eyes, a desperate plea masked by unwavering resolve. "You leave at sunrise. That was the plan. Then we go with you. 3 days. After that, we separate." She paused, her jaw tight. "Or we all die here." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. This wasn't a bartering dispute. This was about survival, raw and immediate, and somehow he'd become an unwilling player in a deadly game. "Who's coming?" The younger woman finally spoke, her voice a bare whisper. Someone who does not take no for an answer. Fletcher glanced between them, then towards the tree line. The morning light, once welcoming, now felt like a spotlight, illuminating his vulnerability. He could feel unseen eyes, a weight pressing down on them. This moment, this clearing, was the deceptive calm before a storm of violence. He considered his $12, the horse that represented his escape, the reality that he was alone, miles from anywhere, with two women who were a burden and a target. He could refuse, send them back, salvage his own plans. But the grim determination in the older woman's eyes told him all he needed to know. Turning them away was a death sentence, and whoever hunted them would likely see him as collateral damage, a loose end to be silenced. 3 days, Fletcher said, his voice resigned. Then you tell me everything, and I mean everything. The older woman nodded once, a flicker of relief crossing her face, gone so quickly he almost imagined it. 3 days. Fletcher moved to the fire pit, stirring the ashes back to life. His hands worked mechanically, but his mind raced. He'd sought a simple escape. Instead, he'd purchased a war he didn't understand, against an enemy he couldn't see. $12 had never felt so burdensome, and the knowledge that whoever was hunting them was already drawing closer was a lead weight in his stomach. They broke camp in tense silence. Fletcher observed the women, noting their practiced efficiency. They moved with a quiet purpose, as if rehearsing for this escape their entire lives. The older one scanned the tree line every few seconds, while the younger kept her hand near a knife concealed beneath her cloak. Whatever hunted them, they'd faced it before. Fletcher saddled the mare, his mind calculating possible escape routes, each more perilous than the last. Bandits, claim jumpers, men who saw the frontier as a lawless playground. He'd encountered them all. But the terror in these women's eyes hinted at something far more sinister, something deeply personal. "What do I call you?" Fletcher asked, tightening the cinch. The older woman looked up from rolling their blankets. "Ayana, and Kiona, my sister." Fletcher nodded. "I'm Fletcher, and I need to know what I'm protecting you from." Ayana's jaw tightened. 3 days. That was agreement. Agreements changed. Fletcher met her gaze. "Someone's hunting you. I'm not riding blind into an ambush." Kiona whispered something in a language Fletcher didn't understand. Ayana shook her head sharply, but Kiona persisted, her voice urgent. Finally, Ayana turned back to Fletcher, her expression resigned. "There is a man. He wants our father's land, rich land. Water runs through it." She paused, choosing her words with care. "He believes if he takes us, our father will have no choice but to surrender everything." "Takes you?" Fletcher felt his stomach twist. "You mean as hostages?" "Yes." Ayana's voice was flat. "He has done this before. 2 others. They did not survive to tell what happened." Fletcher's hands stilled. The morning air felt colder. "How many men does he have?" 6, maybe 7. Kiona spoke quietly. "They know these hills better than anyone." "Then why send you to me? I'm one man with a rifle and a horse I just bought." Ayana stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. And for the first time, Fletcher saw past her guarded facade, glimpsed the exhaustion, the fear she fought to conceal. "Our father heard stories about you." Fletcher's blood ran cold. "Stories? 2 winters ago, the camp near Silver Ridge." He flinched. How did they know about that? "Word travels, even to our people." Ayana held his gaze. "He heard that you stood between 12 miners and a family they wanted to burn out. Alone, outnumbered, you did not run." "I got lucky," Fletcher said quietly, "and 3 of those miners are dead now." "But the family lived." Ayana's voice cracked slightly. "That is why he chose you. Not because you are perfect. Because when it mattered, you did not walk away." Fletcher looked at the 2 women, at their meager possessions, at the constant glances towards the ridgeline. He thought of the $12 in his pocket, blood money now, and how a simple horse trade had devolved into a life-or-death gamble. "This man," Fletcher said slowly. "What's his name?" "Gideon Pratt." Ayana spat the name like poison. "He owns half the territory. Wants the other half." Fletcher had heard the name whispered in saloons, cursed by homesteaders who had lost everything. Pratt didn't just seize land, he erased people. Mound up, Fletcher said, his decision made. We move fast and we don't stop until dark. As they rode out, Fletcher caught a flicker of movement in the trees behind them, a fleeting shadow where no shadow should be. He didn't mention it. Ayanna had already seen it, her hand instinctively moving to the knife at her belt. Their eyes met, sharing a silent understanding. They were being hunted and their time was running out. They pressed their horses hard, the terrain unforgiving. Fletcher avoided main trails, guiding them through dense brush and across rocky outcroppings, hoping to slow their pursuers. But with each check over his shoulder, he sensed them, a relentless pressure, steady and patient. By midday, the mare was lathered in sweat, breathing hard. Ayanna and Kiona shared the second horse, acquired from a homesteader an hour into their flight. The old man, surprisingly uncurious, had accepted $3 and a terse warning to bolt his doors for the coming week. They paused at a creek to water the horses. Fletcher scanned the surrounding ridges while Ayanna filled their canteens, and Kiona watched their back trail, posture rigid with anxiety. How far to the pass? Fletcher asked. 2 days if we keep this pace, Ayanna said, straightening, water dripping from her hands. But they will try to cut us off before we reach it. Why not after? Because after the pass, we enter territory where Pratt has no power. The settlers there do not fear him. They have numbers, unity. She paused, her voice laced with bitterness. Everything our people lack. How long has he been threatening your father? 6 months. He started with offers, then threats. Then he came with his men and took our neighbor's daughter. Ayanna's voice dropped, barely audible. They found her 3 weeks later. What was left of her? Kiona made a choked sob, a sound like a wounded animal. Ayanna moved to her sister, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long, silent moment, and Fletcher looked away to give them what little privacy he could. That's when he saw the rider, a lone figure silhouetted against the eastern ridge, too distant for a clear shot, but close enough to send a message. The man sat motionless on his horse, watching them, ensuring they knew they were seen. We need to move, Fletcher said quietly. Ayanna followed his gaze, her face paling. That is Cormac, Pratt's tracker. If he found us, the others are close. They mounted quickly, Fletcher's mind racing through the dwindling options. They couldn't outrun 7 men, not with exhausted horses and the arduous terrain ahead. They couldn't stand and fight, not 3 against 7 in open country. That left only one choice: find a defensible position and pray that Pratt's men weren't willing to die for their employer's greed. 2 hours later, Fletcher found what he was looking for: a narrow canyon, its steep walls offering natural protection. Dangerous if they were trapped, but it would force Pratt's men to approach 1 or 2 at a time. They made camp in the canyon's back corner, where the converging walls provided a natural shelter. Fletcher secured the horses and checked his rifle. 12 rounds, not nearly enough for a protracted fight. Can you shoot? He asked Ayanna. She reached into her bundle, revealing a revolver. Old but well-maintained. Our father taught us, he said, the frontier respects only 2 things: strength and the willingness to use it. Fletcher nodded. Good, because when they come, they'll try to reason. Make it sound reasonable. That's when they're most dangerous. As darkness descended, Fletcher built a small fire, not to cook, but to advertise their location. If Pratt's men wanted a fight, they'd come to him, where he could control the engagement. Kiona sat close to her sister, and for the first time, Fletcher witnessed tears streaming silently down her face. Ayanna held her hand, her own features carved from stone. I am sorry, Ayanna said to Fletcher. My father asked too much of a stranger. He asked exactly the right man, Fletcher replied. A man who would turn away from this ain't worth the horse he sold me. The first shout echoed through the canyon just before midnight, a friendly, almost jovial voice from the entrance. Fletcher Knox, we know you're in there, and we know you don't want trouble. Fletcher gripped his rifle, waiting. The voice continued, smooth as snake oil. Pratt sent us to collect what's his. Hand over the women, and we ride away peaceful. Nobody needs to die tonight. Fletcher glanced at Ayanna and Kiona, saw them staring back, assessing his resolve. Was he the man their father thought he was, or had they gambled their lives on a lie? The voice again. What's it going to be, cowboy? 2 women you don't know, or your life? Fletcher stood, positioning himself in the firelight. He needed to let them see his intentions. Make it clear he wasn't just some fool trapped in a canyon with a rifle. And that's when everything went wrong. A gunshot cracked through the night, not directed at Fletcher, but impacting the canyon wall behind him. Rock exploded, showering them with fragments. A warning shot, a demonstration of force. Fletcher ducked behind cover as 3 more shots followed, each one closer. They weren't trying to kill him, yet. They were showcasing his vulnerability, the precariousness of his position. "Last chance, Knox!" The voice, amplified by the canyon walls, boomed around him. "You're just a drifter who made a bad deal. Walk away, and we'll pretend this never happened." Fletcher glanced back at Ayanna and Kiona. They pressed themselves against the rear wall, weapons drawn, but their faces betrayed their fear. Kiona looked younger than her years, her eyes wide with terror. "How many can you see?" Ayanna whispered. 4 at the entrance, maybe more in the shadows." Fletcher checked his rifle. "They're spreading out, trying to get angles on us." Another voice, rougher than the first, called out, "We got all night, girls. Pratt pays us whether you're breathing or not when we bring you in." Cruel, confident laughter echoed through the canyon, the sound of men who'd committed these atrocities before and never faced any consequences. Fletcher's jaw tightened. He'd faced bad situations before, but this was different. These weren't just claim jumpers or drunk miners. These were professionals, men who hunted people for profit and likely enjoyed it. "There," Kiona murmured, pointing towards the eastern wall. A shadow flickered between the rocks, attempting to flank their position. Fletcher aimed and fired. The shadow yelped, scrambling back. A graze at best, but it sent a message. The response was immediate, a barrage of gunfire lighting up the canyon entrance. Fletcher pulled Ayanna and Kiona down as bullets ricocheted off the stone walls. The horses screamed and thrashed, panicked by the onslaught. When the shooting ceased, the sudden silence was deafening. Then that first voice again, no longer friendly. "You just made this personal, Cowboy. Pratt wanted them alive, but he'll settle for a message. And we'll start by killing that horse you paid so much for." Fletcher's blood turned to ice. They'd been watching him from the start. They knew about the $12, about Takakota. This wasn't solely about the women anymore. This was about sending a clear, brutal message to anyone who dared cross Gideon Pratt. "What do we do?" Kiona asked, her voice barely audible. Fletcher surveyed the narrow canyon behind them. He had initially viewed it as a defensible position, but he now recognized it for what it truly was, a trap. If Pratt's men were patient, they could either starve them out or simply wait until dawn, when shooting would be significantly easier. "We can't stay here," Fletcher said quietly. "There's got to be another way out." Ayanna shook her head. "The walls are too steep. We would need—" She trailed off as Fletcher pointed upward. Where the moonlight illuminated the canyon's far wall, there was a jagged crack in the stone. Not a path, certainly, but perhaps enough of a climb for desperate individuals. "You can't be serious," Ayanna breathed. "They'll expect us to remain put or attempt to break through the front. They won't anticipate us going up." Fletcher met her eyes. "It's dangerous, possibly impossible, but it's the sole chance we have." Another shout from the entrance. "We're coming in. You got 30 seconds to throw out your weapons and send the women forward." Fletcher began gathering their meager supplies, moving swiftly and silently. The horses would have to be left behind. The thought burned, but there was no alternative. He whispered instructions to Ayanna and Kiona, gesturing toward the route he had spotted. "When I start shooting, climb as fast as you can. Don't look back." "What about you?" Ayanna gripped his arm. "I'll be right behind you, but someone needs to keep them focused on this position." Fletcher pulled free gently. "Trust me." He moved to the front of their shelter, positioning himself where he could observe the canyon entrance. He saw 4 distinct shadows advancing, weapons drawn. They believed it was over. They thought Fletcher would surrender or perish trying to defend an indefensible position. Fletcher inhaled deeply, aimed at the nearest shadow, and fired. Then everything erupted into chaos. Gunfire exploded from both sides. Fletcher moved between cover points, firing and reloading, generating as much noise and mayhem as he could. Behind him, he heard Ayanna and Kiona beginning their ascent, their movements concealed by the firefight. A bullet struck Fletcher's shoulder, throwing him against the rock wall. Pain surged through his arm, but he forced himself to continue firing. He needed to buy them more time. He needed to ensure they reached the top before Pratt's men realized what was happening. Another minute. Just one more. Then he heard Ayana's voice from above, urgent and strained. "Fletcher! Now!" He turned to run and found Cormac the tracker stepping out of the shadows directly between him and freedom. Cormac was younger than Fletcher anticipated, perhaps 30, with frigid eyes and a knife already drawn. He didn't speak, simply smiled as if he had been waiting for this moment the entire night. Fletcher's shoulders screamed where the bullet had ripped through muscle. His rifle was empty. Cormac knew this. It was why he had chosen the knife. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about delivering a message written in pain. They circled one another. From behind Cormac, Fletcher could hear the other men realizing what was happening, shouting and running towards their position. He had seconds, not minutes. "They're going to catch you anyway," Cormac said casually. "Pratt always gets what he wants. The only question is how much you're going to hurt first." Fletcher didn't waste his breath on words. He feigned left and drove forward with all his remaining strength. Cormac was quick, but Fletcher was fueled by desperation and raw fury. They collided, and Fletcher's momentum carried them both crashing into the canyon wall. The knife flashed, and Fletcher caught Cormac's wrist, but his injured shoulder gave way, and the blade sliced across his ribs, a shallow but searing wound. Fletcher drove his knee up hard, hearing Cormac grunt, then slammed the tracker's hand against the rock until the knife clattered to the ground. They grappled in the dirt. Cormac was stronger, but Fletcher was fighting for something more than money. He wrapped his good arm around Cormac's throat and squeezed. The tracker thrashed, clawing at Fletcher's face, but Fletcher held on. "Fletcher!" Ayana's voice sliced through the struggle. She'd climbed back down, her revolver aimed at Cormac's head. "Let him go. We need to move." Fletcher released his grip. Cormac collapsed, gasping for air. Fletcher grabbed the fallen knife and stood, swaying. Blood soaked his shirt from both wounds. The world tilted dangerously, but he forced himself to focus. The other men were 50 feet away and closing fast. Fletcher and Ayana ran for the wall. Kiona reached down, extending her hand. Fletcher pushed Ayana up first, then used his good arm to start climbing. Every movement sent fire through his shoulder and ribs. The stone cut his hands. His boots slipped on loose rock. Gunfire erupted below. Bullets sparked off the canyon wall inches from Fletcher's head. He climbed faster, driven by adrenaline and terror. Ayana and Kiona pulled him over the edge just as a bullet tore through the space where his leg had been. They collapsed on the flat ground above the canyon. Panting, Fletcher's vision blurred. He could feel blood running down his side, soaking into the dirt beneath him. "We have to keep moving," Kiona said urgently. "They will find another way up." "Give him a minute," Ayana snapped. She tore fabric from her dress and pressed it against Fletcher's shoulder. The pressure made him gasp. "You are losing too much blood. Don't have a minute." Fletcher forced himself to sit up. The world spun, but he gritted his teeth and stood. "How far to the pass?" "10 pounder me, maybe less." Ayana wrapped the makeshift bandage tight. "But you cannot make it like this. Watch me." They moved through the darkness, Fletcher between the two women. Ayana kept one hand on his good arm, steadying him when he stumbled. The terrain was rough, all rocks and hidden holes waiting to break an ankle. Behind them, Fletcher heard shouting. Pratt's men had found the climbing route. The pursuit was continuing, but they'd bought time. Maybe enough. Dawn broke slowly, painting the sky in shades of blood. Fletcher's legs felt like they were made of wet rope. Each breath came harder than the last. But ahead, through his fading vision, he could see it. The pass. The border between Pratt's territory and freedom. "Almost there," Kiona whispered. That's when they heard the horses, not behind them. Ahead, Fletcher's heart sank as riders emerged from the pass. 5 of them spread in a line that blocked the only way forward. In the center, on a black stallion, sat a man in expensive clothes that seemed absurd in the wilderness. His face was weathered but handsome, his smile the kind that rich men wore when they knew they'd won. Gideon Pratt had been waiting for them all along. "Well," Pratt called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "The $12 cowboy, I've been eager to meet you. He gestured to the pass behind him. I'm afraid this road is closed, and you've got nowhere left to run. Fletcher's hand moved to his empty rifle, then to his belt, where Cormac's knife still hung. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. They were trapped between two groups of armed men with nowhere to hide and no strength left to fight. Ayanna moved closer to Fletcher, her voice breaking. I am sorry. We should have told you everything from the beginning. Fletcher looked at her, then at Kiona, then at Pratt, sitting there with his victory smile. The sun climbed higher, exposing them completely. No cover, no options, no way out. Tell me now, Fletcher said quietly. What didn't you tell me? Ayanna met his eyes, and Fletcher saw something there that made his blood run colder than any of Pratt's threats. Our father, she whispered, he did not send us to you just for protection. Pratt's laughter rolled across the open ground, and Fletcher realized with sickening certainty that he'd been playing a game where he never knew the real rules. Fletcher kept his eyes on Pratt while Ayanna spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The horse was never the real deal. It was a test to see if you would honor an agreement even when it cost you everything. Why? Fletcher's voice was from pain and exhaustion. Because Pratt killed our mother 5 years ago in front of witnesses, but no one would testify. They were too afraid. Ayanna's hands trembled. Our father needed someone who could not be bought or frightened, someone who would stand when others ran. Pratt dismounted slowly, deliberately. He walked toward them with the confidence of a man who owned everything he could see. Your father was always clever, Takakota sending his daughters with a stranger, hoping to find some frontier hero. He laughed. But heroes die easy out here. Knocks, especially ones bleeding from 2 bullet wounds. Fletcher's grip tightened on the knife. His vision swam, but he forced himself to stay upright. Behind them, Cormac and the others emerged from the rocks, weapons drawn. They were completely surrounded. Now here's what's going to happen, Pratt continued. You're going to step aside. The women come with me, and maybe I let you crawl away to die somewhere quiet. And if I don't, Pratt's smile widened, then I kill all 3 of you right here and tell everyone you died trying to kidnap Takakota's daughters. Who's going to argue? A dead drifter and 2 women from a tribe nobody cares about. Fletcher felt Kiona press something into his hand, a folded piece of paper. He glanced down just long enough to see writing names, dates, locations. Our father knew Pratt would try this, Kiona whispered. He spent 2 years gathering proof. Every crime, every death, every piece of land stolen. That paper names witnesses willing to testify if someone can guarantee their safety. Fletcher understood then the entire arrangement. The horse, the women, the $12 that bought not just transportation, but responsibility. Takakota had sent his daughters with the only thing that could destroy Pratt, evidence, and he'd bet everything on Fletcher being the kind of man who would protect it. You look confused, Knox. Pratt took another step closer. Let me make this simple. Drop the knife. Walk away or I kill you and take what I want anyway. Fletcher looked at Ayanna. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set with determination. She'd known what her father was asking, had known the risks, still came anyway because the alternative was watching Pratt take everything from everyone who couldn't fight back. The $12, Fletcher said suddenly. That's what your father had left, wasn't it? Ayanna nodded. Everything else went to hiding the evidence, to paying people to write down what they saw. He gave you all he had and hoped it was enough. Fletcher laughed, though it sent pain shooting through his ribs. Man sells me his best horse, sends me his daughters, and gives me the tools to destroy his enemy. All for $12. He met Pratt's eyes. That's not a deal. That's a declaration of war. Pratt's smile faded. Last chance, cowboy. Fletcher straightened, despite the agony. The knife felt solid in his hand. The paper burned like fire in his pocket. You know what I realized? You're not afraid of me killing you. You're afraid of what's written on this paper. That paper means nothing without witnesses who will talk. Maybe, Fletcher took a step forward, but you rode all the way out here to stop it from reaching anyone who matters. That tells me it means something. Pratt's hand moved toward his gun. His men raised their weapons. Fletcher felt Ayanna and Kiona move closer, their bodies tense and ready. $12, Fletcher said quietly. Takakota paid $12 for me to make a choice. Stand or run, fight or surrender. He met Pratt's eyes. I'm choosing to make you regret you didn't kill me in that canyon when you had the chance. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the ground. 8 men with guns against 1 wounded cowboy and 2 women. The odds were impossible. The outcome seemed certain, but Fletcher saw something flicker in Pratt's eyes. Something that looked like doubt. Because men like Pratt understood money and fear and power. They didn't understand someone willing to die for $12 and a promise to a stranger. Kill them, Pratt ordered. And Fletcher moved, not toward Pratt, toward the pass. Toward the one place Pratt couldn't follow without risking everything he'd built. Run, Fletcher shouted to Ayanna and Kiona. Get across the border. Gunfire erupted. Fletcher felt another bullet tear into him, this time through his leg. He stumbled but kept moving. Ayanna caught him, her arm around his waist, half carrying him. Kiona ran ahead, screaming for help toward the settlement on the other side of the pass. 50 yards, 40, 30. Fletcher's leg gave out. He crashed to the ground, pulling Ayanna down with him. Pratt's men closed in, their footsteps pounding. Then Fletcher heard something beautiful. Voices. Many voices. People emerging from the pass. Settlers, homesteaders, men and women with rifles and determination. And at the front, an old man Fletcher recognized from years ago. One of the families he defended at Silver Ridge. That's far enough, Pratt, the old man shouted. This is free territory, and you're not welcome here. Pratt froze. His men looked between him and the growing line of armed settlers. Fletcher counted at least 20 people, maybe more emerging from the past. Not professional fighters, but homesteaders who'd lost family and land to men like Pratt. They had numbers, and they had fury. This doesn't concern you, Samuel, Pratt called to the old man. His voice stayed calm, but Fletcher saw tension in his shoulders. Just collecting what's mine. Those women aren't yours, Samuel replied. And Knox there saved my daughter's life once. I don't forget debts. He raised his rifle slightly. None of us do. Pratt's men shifted nervously. They were killers, but they weren't stupid. 8 against 20 were bad odds. Against 20 angry settlers who knew the terrain and had nothing left to lose. That was suicide. Fletcher felt Ayanna pressing cloth against his leg wound. The pain was overwhelming, but he forced himself to focus. This was the moment, the turning point, but it wasn't over yet. You think they'll protect you forever? Pratt's mask slipped, showing the rage beneath. I own half this territory. I have connections, money, power. You're just a cowboy who made a bad deal. No. Fletcher struggled to his knees, then to his feet. Ayanna supported him, her arms strong around his waist. I made exactly the deal Takakota intended. He paid $12 for someone who couldn't be bought, who'd carry evidence to people who'd use it, who'd stand between his daughters and men like you. Fletcher pulled out the folded paper, holding it high where everyone could see. This lists every land theft, every murder, every witness you thought was too scared to talk. He looked at Samuel. They were scared until now. Samuel stepped forward, hand extended. Give it here, Knox. We've been waiting for proof like this for 5 years. Pratt's hand moved toward his gun. You deliver that paper and you're a dead man, cowboy. Maybe. Fletcher's voice was steady despite the pain. But you shoot me in front of 20 witnesses and that paper still gets delivered. You let me deliver it and maybe you get to run before the law catches up. He smiled without humor. Either way, you lose. The standoff stretched. Pratt's men looked at their employer, waiting for orders. The settlers held their ground. Fletcher swayed on his ruined leg, but Ayanna kept him upright. Why? Pratt finally asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely confused. Why risk everything for people you don't even know? For $12 and a horse? Fletcher thought about that question, about the years he'd spent drifting, avoiding connections, running from the responsibility of caring whether anyone lived or died, about how that horse trade had offered him exactly what he'd wanted, a way out, a way to keep running. Because Takakota trusted me, Fletcher said quietly, and because these women deserve better than being someone's property, and because every time men like you win, It gets easier for the next one. He met Pratt's eyes. Someone has to stop running eventually. Kiona spoke then, her voice carrying across the tense silence. My mother's name was Dean Hoey. She was 32 when Pratt's men burned our home because my father refused to sell his land. She died protecting me. I was 17. Her voice broke for 5 years. We waited, scared, knowing he would come back. My father used everything we had to find proof to find someone brave enough to use it. She looked at Fletcher with tears streaming down her face. $12 was all he had left after paying for the evidence, but it was enough to buy a horse and hope that the man who needed that horse would be the one we'd been waiting for. The morning light caught the tears on Kiona's cheeks, caught the determination in Ayana's eyes, caught the blood staining Fletcher's clothes and the paper trembling in his hand. Samuel moved forward slowly, carefully, and took the paper from Fletcher. He unfolded it and read, his weathered face hardening with each line. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. Ella Briggs, Thomas Callahan, Sarah Voss, Rebecca Flynn. He read the names like a prayer for the dead. All of them testified to me before they died. All of them said, if anyone came asking, tell the truth about Pratt. He looked at the other settlers. We all know these names. We all lost someone to this man. Pratt's hand was on his gun now, but he didn't draw. Couldn't. Too many eyes watching, too many rifles pointed his direction. Walk away, Pratt, Samuel said, while you still can, because tomorrow this evidence goes to the territorial marshal. And every person here will testify to what you just tried to do. For a long moment, Pratt didn't move. Then he looked at Fletcher with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, Fletcher said. It is. Pratt mounted his horse. His men did the same, moving slowly, weapons still ready. They backed away from the pass, from the settlers, from Fletcher and the women who cost Pratt everything he'd built through fear. When they were finally gone, Fletcher's legs gave out completely. He collapsed into Ayana's arms, consciousness fading. The last thing he heard was her voice, soft and breaking. You did it. You honored the deal. Fletcher wanted to tell her that the deal had never been about $12, that somewhere between the canyon and the pass, between the bullets and the blood, it had become about something else entirely. But darkness took him before he could find the words. Fletcher woke 3 days later in a homesteader's cabin with Ayana sitting beside his bed. The wounds had been cleaned and stitched. His shoulder ached, his ribs burned, but he was alive. Through the window, he could see Kiona talking with Samuel's daughter near a well. Pratt. Fletcher's voice came out rough. Gone. Ayana's hand found his. The territorial marshal came yesterday. Samuel gave him the evidence. They found 3 more witnesses willing to testify now that Pratt ran. She paused. There is a warrant for murder, land theft, conspiracy. He will spend his life running or hanging. Fletcher closed his eyes, relief washing over him. Your father arriving tomorrow. Samuel sent word 3 days ago. Ayana's voice broke slightly. He thought he was sending us to our deaths, that the $12 would buy us a quick end instead of what Pratt planned. But he sent the evidence anyway. He had no choice. If we stayed, Pratt would take everything. If we ran without proof, he would hunt us forever. She squeezed Fletcher's hand. You were the last hope. A stranger he heard about who might be fool enough or brave enough to stand. Fletcher laughed weakly. Not sure which I am. Both, I think. Ayana smiled and Fletcher saw something in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. Not just gratitude, something deeper that had grown through gunfire and blood and impossible choices. Over the next week, Fletcher healed slowly. Takakota arrived with tears streaming down his weathered face, embracing his daughters like he'd expected never to see them again. He tried to thank Fletcher with words that couldn't capture what the $12 had truly bought. You gave me my last hope, Takakota said quietly. Everything I had, everything I was, I put it in the hands of a stranger and prayed you were the man I needed you to be. I almost wasn't, Fletcher admitted. Almost walked away a dozen times, but you did not. Dakota placed a hand on Fletcher's shoulder. That is what matters. The territorial marshal came again 2 weeks later with news. Pratt had been found trying to cross into Mexico. There had been resistance, a brief gunfight. Gideon Pratt was dead, killed by men he'd hired, and who turned on him when they realized his money was worthless against a rope. Justice, Fletcher thought. Rough and final. Samuel offered Fletcher work. Good pay, steady. But Fletcher looked at Ayanna when the offer came, saw the question in her eyes that matched the one in his chest. I might stay a while, Fletcher said. If that's acceptable. Ayanna's smile was answer enough. Months passed. Fletcher helped rebuild what Pratt had destroyed, worked alongside Takakota's people and the settlers, building something that resembled community. The wounds healed, leaving scars that reminded him of the night he'd chosen to stand instead of run. One evening, Fletcher sat with Ayanna, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The mare he'd bought for $12 grazed nearby, strong and healthy. Everything Takakota had promised. Do you ever regret it? Ayanna asked. The deal. Fletcher thought about that question, about how he'd wanted a simple escape and got a war instead, about how $12 had bought him bullet wounds and nightmares and the responsibility of other people's lives, about how those same $12 had given him something he hadn't known he needed. Purpose, connection, a place where running away wasn't the only option anymore. $12, Fletcher said quietly. Your father bought the most expensive horse in the territory because what came with it wasn't his daughters needing rescue. He looked at Ayanna, saw the understanding in her eyes. It was me needing to be found. Ayanna leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Behind them, Kiona laughed at something Takakota said. Smoke rose from the settlement's chimneys. Life continued, built on the foundation of a desperate gamble and a stranger's choice. Fletcher had spent years believing he was worth exactly what he could carry. No more, no less. Takakota had seen something different, had looked at a drifter and bet everything on the possibility that underneath the running and fear, there was someone worth $12 in a prayer. Turned out both of them had been right. The deal was complete. The debt was paid. And Fletcher Knox finally understood that sometimes the price of a horse is just $12. But the cost of becoming the person you were meant to be, that's measured in something far more valuable than money. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another tale of courage and impossible choices where honor is tested and lives hang in the balance. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to help us keep bringing you stories like these. Your support means the world too.